My name is Robert Thompson. I'm 78 years old, and I live in a modest house in the Oak Park neighborhood of Chicago. I never imagined that at my age I would experience one of the most remarkable adventures of my life, alongside a four-legged companion who would completely change my routine and protect me in ways I never thought possible. It all began 2 years ago when my daughter Sarah insisted I needed companionship after the death of my beloved wife, Margaret. "Dad, you can't stay alone in this house," she would repeat every week during our phone conversations. I always responded that I was fine, that I had my neighbors, my routine at Tony's Deli, and the poker games at Murphy's Bar. But the loneliness weighed heavily, especially during the long, silent nights. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon in March when everything changed. I was walking slowly down Michigan Avenue, returning from my doctor's appointment, when I heard a strange noise coming from a narrow alley between two commercial buildings. Curiosity has always been one of my flaws, or virtues, as Margaret used to say. I approached cautiously and saw a scene that broke my heart. A Rottweiler puppy, couldn't have been more than 3 months old, was huddled in a soaked cardboard box. His black and tan fur was dirty and wet, and his little brown eyes stared at me with an expression that mixed fear and hope. Around me, people hurried by, protected by colorful umbrellas, without even noticing that small, abandoned life. "Come here, little guy," I murmured, extending my trembling hand. The puppy hesitated for a few seconds, sniffed my palm, and to my surprise, slowly approached. His eyes never stopped looking at me, as if he were evaluating whether I was a trustworthy person. In that moment, I felt a connection I hadn't experienced since Margaret had passed away. I picked up the little one, feeling his cold body tremble against my chest. "You're coming home with me," I said, covering him with my jacket. During the walk to my house, he remained quiet, as if he knew he was safe. Sarah was worried when I told her about my new companion. "Dad, a Rottweiler. Isn't that breed very big and aggressive?" she questioned over the phone. I explained that he was just an abandoned puppy who needed care, and that I also needed company. Reluctantly, she agreed, but insisted on helping me with the first veterinary expenses. I named him Duke, a simple name, but one that matched his strong personality that was already beginning to manifest. In the first days, he explored every corner of the house with typical puppy curiosity, but always returned to stay close to my feet. It was as if he instinctively knew that his mission was to accompany me. If you're enjoying this exciting story, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. The veterinarian, Dr. Williams, a young and attentive man who worked at a clinic near home, examined Duke thoroughly. "Mr. Thompson, this puppy is healthy, just a little malnourished. With proper care, he'll become a strong and loyal dog. Rottweilers are known for their intelligence and protective instinct," he explained, while applying the necessary vaccines. The first weeks were of mutual adaptation. Duke grew rapidly, and I relearned to have daily responsibilities, feeding him, taking him for walks, playing, activities that brought renewed purpose to my mornings. My neighbors, initially cautious about the presence of a Rottweiler in the neighborhood, soon became enchanted with his docile and playful nature. Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor from the house next door, an 82-year-old lady who had always been very observant, was one of the first to notice something special about Duke. "Robert, this dog of yours has a different look," she commented one afternoon while we watered our plants in the yard. "He looks at me as if he's thinking, you know. It's not the common look of a dog." I still didn't know how right she was. Duke demonstrated impressive intelligence for his age. He learned basic commands with surprising ease and was always attentive to my movements and mood. When I felt sad remembering Margaret, he would approach and rest his head on my leg, as if he perceived my need for comfort. As the months passed, our routine became established. Morning walks to the deli, where Tony always saved a piece of bread for Duke. Afternoons in the yard, where I read the newspaper while he explored every inch of the property. Quiet evenings watching television, him lying next to me on the couch, But it was during one of those apparently normal afternoons that I began to realize that Duke possessed an extraordinary ability, something that would completely change our coexistence and protect me from dangers I never imagined I was facing. Duke was 8 months old when the first episode occurred that made me realize he was different from any dog I had ever known. It was a typical Thursday in September, with that Chicago weather that oscillates between the morning cold and afternoon warmth. I was in the yard pruning my rosebush when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found myself face to face with a well-dressed young man, probably in his 30s, carrying a leather briefcase and a smile that seemed too forced. Duke, who until then had been quietly lying in the shade of the oak tree, immediately got up and positioned himself between the visitor and me. "Good morning, sir. My name is Michael Davis. I work with private retirement plans and would like to talk to you about a unique opportunity for senior citizens," he said, extending his hand to greet me. Duke growled softly, a sound he had never made before, and remained firm in his protective position. "Sorry about my dog's behavior," I said, trying to pull Duke aside, but he didn't move. "He's very protective." The salesman forced a nervous laugh. "Don't worry, sir. I work with Secure Future, a serious company in the retirement industry. We have a special plan that can triple your Social Security in just 2 years. Wouldn't you like to leave a larger inheritance for your family?" While he spoke, Duke remained tense, with his ears erect and eyes fixed on the man. Occasionally he would look at me, as if trying to communicate something important. His behavior was so unusual that I began to pay more attention to the salesman's words and less to the proposal itself. "Look here, Mr. Thompson. May I call you that? For a person of your age, with your life experience, this investment is practically guaranteed. You just need to sign this document today and make an initial deposit of $15,000. It's a small amount considering the return you'll have," Michael continued, taking papers from the briefcase. Duke growled louder and took a few steps forward, never taking his eyes off the visitor. His body language was completely altered: tense tail, erect posture, contracted muscles. It was as if every fiber of his being was screaming, "Danger." Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow this incredible story about animal intuition. "You know what, Michael," I said, finally paying attention to the signals Duke was sending me. "I think it's better if I consult with my daughter before making any decision." The man's expression changed subtly, and Duke caught it instantly. The dog advanced another step with a more serious and assertive growl. Michael stepped back, clearly uncomfortable with the animal's presence. "Mr. Thompson, this is a unique opportunity, valid only today. Tomorrow the rates could increase significantly," he insisted, but was already putting the papers back in the briefcase. "Are you sure you don't want to take advantage?" "I'm sure," I replied firmly, and Duke relaxed slightly as if he approved of my decision. "I have a principle of not making important decisions without talking to my family." Michael muttered something about lost opportunity and left quickly. As soon as I closed the door, Duke came to me, wagging his tail for the first time since the visitor arrived, as if he were congratulating me for making the right choice. Later, when I told Sarah about the visit, she was alarmed. "Dad, for heaven's sake, that's one of the most common scam methods against seniors. They promise impossible returns and disappear with the money." "Thank goodness you didn't sign anything." It was at that moment I began to understand. Duke had detected something in Michael that I, with all my life experience, couldn't perceive consciously. My dog had a sharp instinct for identifying ill-intentioned people. The following week, my suspicion was confirmed when Mrs. Patterson told me that a salesman with the same description had visited Mr. Johnson 3 houses down and managed to convince him to invest $20,000 in a similar scheme. "Poor Johnson is desperate trying to contact that company, but the phone doesn't work anymore," she informed me, shaking her head sadly. I began to observe Duke with different eyes. During our walks through the neighborhood, I noticed how he reacted differently to each person we encountered. With children, elderly people, and most adults, he was docile and sometimes even affectionate. But occasionally, with certain people, his posture changed completely. He became alert, protective, suspicious. Dr. Williams was fascinated when I told him about Duke's behavior. "Mr. Thompson, dogs have sensory capabilities far superior to ours. They can detect changes in body odor, alterations in heart rate, muscle tension, things that indicate nervousness, lying, or bad intentions. Duke simply developed this ability more acutely. But doctor, it's as if he knew exactly when someone wants to harm me," I insisted. "It's not just common dog suspicion." "Rottweilers are naturally protective and extremely intelligent," explained the veterinarian. "Combined with the special bond you've developed, it's possible that Duke has learned to identify subtle signals that indicate danger to you specifically. It's a form of canine emotional intelligence." In the following weeks, I discreetly tested Duke's reactions with different people. Legitimate salespeople from known stores, mail carriers, electric company workers. With all of them, Duke maintained a neutral or friendly posture. But whenever someone with ulterior motives appeared, his transformation was immediate and unmistakable. My routine began to include a new dimension of security. Duke became not only my companion, but my personal guardian, a detector of bad intentions that worked better than any security system I could imagine. 2 months after the episode with the insurance salesman, Duke and I had developed almost telepathic communication. He learned that when I observed him during interactions with strangers, he should clearly demonstrate his impressions about the person. I, for my part, learned to interpret every nuance of his behavior. Slightly tilted ears meant mild distrust. Low growls indicated moderate alert. Completely tense posture and loud growls were signs of imminent danger. It was a November morning, with that typical Chicago autumn heat that made the air shimmer over the asphalt. I was in the yard watering the plants when I heard insistent knocking at the front door. Duke, who was napping under the maple tree shade, lifted his ears and accompanied me to the entrance. Upon opening the door, I found myself facing a man of approximately 50 years old, dark-haired, well-dressed, with a broad and familiar smile. "Uncle Robert," he exclaimed, opening his arms as if wanting to embrace me. "I can't believe I finally found you." Duke immediately positioned himself between us, but didn't show aggression. He remained in an alert state, carefully observing every movement of the visitor. His tail wasn't wagging, but it wasn't completely tense either, a sign that I should proceed with caution. "I'm sorry, but I don't," I began to say, confused. "Of course you don't recognize me," he interrupted, laughing. "I'm Charles Edward, son of your cousin Rose, remember? From Detroit? The last time we saw each other I was just a child, at the parties at Grandma Helen's house." Grandma Helen's name caught me off guard. She really existed and was an important figure in the family when I was young. My expression must have changed, because Duke looked at me questioningly, as if asking whether I knew this person. "Wow, Charles Edward," I said, still uncertain. "How did you get my address?" "Oh, Uncle, it was a long search. I asked several relatives until someone gave me your address. You know how family is, right? We lose touch over time," he explained, gesticulating animatedly. Duke continued observing with erect ears and penetrating gaze. Come in," I offered, still processing the situation. "Would you like coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be great, Uncle. I came from far away to see you." He entered the living room and sat on the couch, making himself completely comfortable. Duke followed him, maintaining a safe distance, but never taking his eyes off him. If you're curious to know how this situation develops, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. While I prepared coffee in the kitchen, I could hear Charles Edward commenting about the house, praising the decoration. "Wow, Uncle, what a cozy house. You can tell it was made with a lot of love." His words sounded right, but something in the intonation subtly bothered me. I returned to the living room with the coffee and noticed that Duke had strategically positioned himself near the couch, from where he could observe both the visitor and me. His eyes alternated between us two, clearly analyzing the situation. "So, Charles Edward," I said, serving the coffee, "how is your mother, and what are you doing for a living?" "Oh, Uncle, unfortunately, Mum passed away 2 years ago. Cancer, you know how it is," he replied, lowering his eyes dramatically. "That's why I wanted to find you, to keep family ties alive." I felt a pang of guilt for not having known about Rose's death, but something continued to bother me. Duke, who until then remained quiet, began to show signs of agitation. He got up, took a few steps around the room, and repositioned himself closer to me. "Actually, Uncle," Charles Edward continued, "I'm going through a very difficult situation. I have a small construction materials company in Detroit, and with all this crisis, suppliers are pressuring for payments. I need $30,000 urgently, or I'll lose everything." Duke growled softly, an almost imperceptible sound, but one I had already learned to identify. His ears tilted back, and his posture became slightly more tense. "It's a temporary situation, Uncle. I have a big contract confirmed for December, and I'll be able to pay you back with interest in 2 months. You would be my savior," he insisted with teary eyes. Duke's growl became more audible, and he moved to position himself directly between Charles Edward and me. His tail was tense, and his breathing had changed. "Charles," I said, paying attention to my dog's signals, "that's a high amount. I need to think about it carefully." "I understand, Uncle, but the situation is really urgent. If I don't get this money by tomorrow, I'll lose the contracts and consequently the company I spent years building," he pressed, leaning forward in the armchair. Duke immediately moved, positioning himself completely in front of me, with a more assertive growl. It was clear that my dog had detected something that my conscious senses still couldn't completely identify. "You know what, Charles Edward," I said, completely trusting Duke's instinct, "I'm going to be honest with you. I don't remember you or your mother Rose, and my dog here has an incredible instinct for people. I think it's better if you leave." His expression changed instantly. The fake smile disappeared, and a mask fell from his face. "Mr. Thompson, you're being very unfair to me. We're family." Duke advanced a step with a serious and threatening growl. Charles Edward visibly stepped back, clearly intimidated by the dog's behavior. "True family doesn't need to prove kinship with vague stories and money requests," I replied, more confident. "Please leave my house." He left grumbling something about lost opportunity and ungrateful family. As soon as I closed the door, Duke came to me, wagging his tail and allowing me to pet his head, as if he were congratulating me for making the right decision. Later, when I told Sarah about the incident, she was furious. "Dad, that's a classic scam. They research basic information about families and pretend to be distant relatives. You did right to trust Duke and send him away." After the episode with the supposed nephew, I decided to investigate more deeply what was happening in my neighborhood. Duke had saved me from 2 fraud attempts in just a few months, and I began to question whether this was coincidence or if I was being systematically targeted by criminals. Sarah was alarmed when I told her about Charles Edward. "Dad, this isn't coincidence. Elderly people are being preferentially targeted by scammers, especially those who live alone. You need to be more alert," she warned during our weekly phone conversation. "But daughter, that's exactly what I want to tell you," I replied, petting Duke, who was resting beside me. "Duke has been protecting me in an extraordinary way. It's as if he can identify these people before I even suspect." I decided to talk with Mrs. Patterson, whose natural curiosity and longevity in the neighborhood made her a valuable source of information. One December afternoon, while she watered her violets on the porch, I approached with Duke for an informal conversation. "Mrs. Patterson, I've noticed some strange visits here in the neighborhood lately. Have you noticed anything similar?" I asked, feigning nonchalance. She immediately stopped what she was doing and looked around, as if making sure no one else was listening. "Robert, I'm glad you brought up that subject. I was just wanting to talk to someone about this." Duke sat patiently beside me, but kept his ears erect, as he always did when he felt the conversation was important. Mrs. Patterson noticed his attentive behavior. "This Duke of yours is very smart, isn't he?" she commented, smiling at the dog. Last week he growled at a man who passed in front of your house several times, looking over the fence. My attention intensified. What kind of man? Young, poorly dressed, with the look of someone who's evaluating something. He passed 3 times on Monday, twice on Tuesday. Duke got agitated every time, she explained, lowering her voice. I even thought about telling you, but I thought it might be old age paranoia. You're right to be suspicious, Mrs. Patterson. Duke has also alerted me about some suspicious people, I confirmed. Do you know if other neighbors have been visited by salespeople or people claiming to be relatives? She looked around again and moved closer. Robert, you won't believe what I discovered. Yesterday I talked with Mrs. Helen from the street above, and she told me that 3 houses on her street were visited by disappeared nephews in less than a month. My heart accelerated. Nephews? Exactly, all with similar stories, distant relatives who suddenly appear needing borrowed money. Mrs. Helen said her neighbor, Mr. Antonio, ended up lending $25,000 to a nephew who never appeared again. This story is getting more and more intense. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. Duke got up and approached us, as if he were following our conversation and understanding its gravity. Mrs. Patterson extended her hand to pet him, and he accepted the affection, but maintained his alert posture. This is very serious, Mrs. Patterson. It means there's a gang operating in the region, specifically targeting elderly people. And that's not all, Robert, she continued, lowering her voice even more. Mrs. Helen also told me that some elderly people reported visits from fake electric company technicians, alarm salespeople who insist on entering the house to evaluate security, all collecting information about our habits, belongings, routines, I completed, beginning to understand the scheme. And Duke has been identifying all of them. I decided to take action. The next morning, I walked to the local police station with Duke on a leash. Detective Michael Santos, a middle-aged man with a tired but attentive look, received me with growing interest as I related the events of recent months. Mr. Thompson, what you're describing is consistent with several reports we've received lately, he said, consulting some papers on his desk. Scams against elderly people have significantly increased in the area, but your dog's case is really unusual. Duke remained calm throughout the conversation, occasionally looking at me as if approving the initiative to seek official help. Detective, I know it may sound strange, but my dog has an incredible instinct for identifying people with bad intentions. Would it be possible to use this somehow to help other elderly people in the neighborhood? The detective studied Duke thoughtfully. Actually, Mr. Thompson, dogs are extensively used in law enforcement precisely because of their ability to detect things that humans don't perceive. What you're suggesting isn't as unusual as it seems. He explained that the police station was developing a neighborhood watch program specifically to protect elderly people against this type of crime. If you're willing, we could organize some meetings with other residents in the area. Your experience with Duke could be valuable for teaching others how to identify warning signs. I left the police station feeling hopeful and determined. Duke seemed equally energized, walking with more confidence, as if understanding that our mission had expanded beyond just protecting me. That evening, while Duke and I sat in the yard enjoying the sunset, I reflected on how much our life had changed. What began as simple companionship had evolved into something much more significant. Duke wasn't just my pet. He was my protector, my partner in ensuring both our safety and the safety of our community. After my conversation at the police station, Detective Santos organized a meeting at the community center to discuss the situation of scams against elderly people. It was a summer evening, with that typical Chicago humidity that makes the air feel heavy, but the room was packed with neighbors concerned about community safety. Duke accompanied me, behaving exemplarily throughout the meeting. He positioned himself beside me, carefully observing each person present, as if it were his duty to assess the integrity of all participants. His serene and alert presence impressed many of those attending. "Ladies and gentlemen," Detective Santos began. "We're here because a wave of crimes targeting seniors has affected our neighborhood. Mr. Robert Thompson has a particular experience that can help us combat this situation." When it was my turn to speak, I felt a mix of nervousness and determination. Duke seemed to perceive my emotional state because he stood up and lightly rested his head on my leg, offering silent support. "Fellow neighbors," I began, looking at the familiar faces around me. "In recent months, my dog Duke has saved me from at least 2 different scams. He can identify people with bad intentions through signals that we humans often don't consciously perceive." Mrs. Helen, a 75-year-old lady with impeccably styled grey hair, raised her hand. "Mr. Thompson, does that really work? Because my husband almost fell for a similar scam last month." "Yes, it works, Mrs. Helen. Duke demonstrates specific behaviors when he detects danger. Low growls, tense posture, protective positioning between me and the suspicious person," I explained, while petting my dog's head. "The key is learning to observe and trust these signals." Mr. Johnson, an elderly man of approximately 80 years whom I knew from the poker games, shared his own experience. "I fell for one of those scams, folks. Lost $20,000 to a fake nephew. I wish I had a dog like Duke." The conversation became increasingly animated. Neighbors began sharing similar stories, creating a disturbing picture of the problem's extent in our area. Duke remained alert throughout the discussion, occasionally changing position, but always maintaining his vigilant demeanor. Dr. Williams had been invited to explain the scientific aspects behind Duke's ability. "Dogs have much more developed senses than ours," he told the group. "They can detect changes in heart rate, body odor, muscle tension, all indicators of nervousness or deception. Duke simply developed this skill extraordinarily. Don't miss the next chapters of this incredible story. Subscribe to the channel." Sarah had also come to the meeting, driving from her home on the south side. She was initially skeptical about the whole situation, but seeing Duke in action and hearing the neighbors' testimonies convinced her of the problem's seriousness. "Folks, as the daughter of one of the potentially affected," she said, "I want to suggest we create a communication system among neighbors. When someone receives a suspicious visit, they could immediately alert others through a WhatsApp group or phone chain." The idea was enthusiastically received. Detective Santos added, "Additionally, we'll increase patrols in the area and establish a direct line for reports of suspicious activity. And with Mr. Thompson's permission, we'd like Duke to occasionally accompany our team during community visits." The meeting resulted in concrete actions. We established a neighborhood watch group, created a communication network, and agreed on regular meetings to share information. Duke had unwittingly become the catalyst for a much larger community safety initiative. In the following weeks, our new system was tested several times. Mrs. Patterson reported a suspicious visit, and immediately 3 neighbors, including Duke and me, came to check the situation. The supposed salesman quickly left when he saw there were multiple people watching. Another time, Mr. Johnson called alerting about a fake technician trying to enter his house. When we arrived, Duke immediately demonstrated his protective behavior, and the man quickly excused himself and disappeared. "You know, Robert," Mrs. Helen commented during one of our informal neighborhood patrols, "Duke has become a local celebrity. People feel safer knowing he's around to help identify threats." It was true. Duke had become a well-known and respected figure in the neighborhood. Children especially loved him, and he always showed patience and gentleness with them, reserving his protective behavior specifically for situations involving potential harm to elderly residents. Our success began attracting attention from neighboring areas. Other communities started asking for our advice on how to establish similar programs. Duke and I occasionally visited other neighborhoods to share our experience. "Dad," Sarah said during one of our Sunday dinners, "I'm really proud of what you've accomplished. Duke didn't just protect you, he protected an entire community." Looking at Duke, lying peacefully next to his food bowl, I reflected on how one abandoned puppy had transformed not only my life, but also the safety of so many people around us. 6 months had passed since we established our protection network in the neighborhood, and the results exceeded all our expectations. Duke had become not only my companion and protector, but a central figure in our community's safety. At 2 years old, he had developed a reputation that extended far beyond the boundaries of Oak Park. It was a sunny March morning when we received an unexpected visit. Detective Santos arrived accompanied by a journalist from ABC News, interested in doing a story about our community initiative and mainly about Duke's extraordinary abilities. "Mr. Thompson," said the journalist, an enthusiastic young woman named Patricia, "we heard that your dog has helped prevent crimes against elderly people in a very special way. Could you tell us how it all began?" Duke, always observant, remained calm during the interview, but maintained his characteristic alert posture. Occasionally he looked at me as if asking whether he should trust these new people. His relaxed body language indicated there was no danger. I told our entire story, from the rainy day I found Duke abandoned to the recent successes of our community watch network. The journalist was fascinated, especially when I explained how Duke could detect ill-intentioned people. "It's like he has an internal radar for bad intentions," I explained, petting his head. "He's never been wrong. Every person he identified as suspicious really had ulterior motives." During filming, the cameraman captured Duke in action when a door-to-door salesman passed by. The dog remained relaxed, his silent assessment indicating the person was harmless. Minutes later, when an unknown young man began observing the houses on the street suspiciously, Duke immediately became alert, confirming his abilities in front of the cameras. The report aired the following week and had impressive repercussions. We received calls from people throughout Chicago interested in learning more about our program. Some wanted to replicate the initiative in their neighborhoods. Others sought advice on how to train their own dogs to identify threats. Dr. Williams was moved seeing the report. "Mr. Thompson, what Duke accomplished is truly exceptional. I'm documenting the case to present at a veterinary conference. It could help other professionals better understand dogs' cognitive capabilities. But the recognition also brought responsibilities. Detective Santos approached me with an official proposal. "Mr. Thompson, the Department of Public Safety would like you to participate in a state pilot program for preventing crimes against elderly people. Duke could help train other dogs for similar functions. This incredible story is reaching its end, but don't forget to subscribe for more content like this." The idea excited me, but also worried me. Duke was already a mature dog, and I didn't want to overload him with too many responsibilities. During our usual evening chat in the yard, I observed my faithful companion. He seemed to understand the importance of what was happening, always staying alert and willing. Sarah fully supported the initiative. "Dad, you can help so many people. And look how healthy and happy Duke is. He found his purpose in life." 3 months later, we inaugurated the first training center for fraud detection dogs for elderly people. Duke became the lead instructor dog, teaching other animals through example. Watching him interact with the younger puppies was moving. He showed infinite patience, as if he knew he was passing on vital knowledge. The program quickly expanded to other cities in the state. I received letters from elderly people who had been protected by dogs trained according to our methods. A lady from Milwaukee wrote, telling how her dog Bruno had alerted about a fake grandson, saving her from losing her life savings. On a Sunday afternoon, while watching another dog graduation at the training center, I reflected on the extraordinary journey Duke and I had traveled. From the abandoned puppy I found in a wet cardboard box to the canine hero protecting hundreds of elderly people throughout the state. "You know, Duke," I murmured, stroking his graying head. The years had left some marks, but his eyes remained as alert as ever. "When I found you in that alley, I thought I was saving you, but actually you saved me, and so many other people." Duke looked at me with that intelligent expression I had learned to love, wagged his tail gently, and rested his head on my leg. It was his way of saying our partnership had been perfect from day one. Today, at 80 years old, I know Duke gave me much more than companionship. He returned my sense of purpose, taught me the importance of intuition, and showed me that sometimes the greatest heroes come in unexpected forms. Our legacy continues living in every trained dog, every protected elderly person, every safer community. And whenever I see an elderly person walking peacefully down the street with their dog beside them, I smile, knowing that maybe, just maybe, that animal also has the special gift that Duke taught me to value, the ability to protect those who need it most, with love, loyalty, and an intuition that goes far beyond what our human understanding can explain. Thank you so much for following this emotional story to the end. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart.